You know, most people agree on most things most of the time. But sometimes we find that we just have to argue for whatever reason. We'll talk about that in a minute. So today I'm going to share with you things about argument. First of all, when to argue. That's one of the things that we have to decide first. Then I'm going to talk to you about how to argue. And when we get into the how to argue, I'm going to give you 5 little tips, I think, that are important on how to argue. And then finally, at the end of the video, I'm going to tell you how to end an argument. And I'm not talking about just saying, well, we agree to disagree. So let's get into it. All right. When do we argue? Sometimes people attack things that are our core values. They go against our principles, and we find ourselves in a conversation or a situation where we feel like we have to say something. A lot of times we say things that we don't have to say, but I'm going to talk about in those situations where we just feel like we have to say something. Because the reality is, in certain situations, not speaking against something, not speaking out about something, is in fact a tacit agreement to what they're saying. You know, they say something that you think is just really wrong, and you know, you're in this conversation, you're not just out in some public forum or whatever, but we're in a real conversation with a real person that matters to us. Sometimes we just have to say something, because saying nothing means, well, we agree. So the next thing we have to come up with is how to argue. Well, how do you do that? And this is what the focus of this is going to be. You have to first get specific. What is it exactly that we're talking about here? Okay? Because it can, turn into all different things. So let's focus this conversation, this piece of this conversation. We hope an argument isn't the only conversation we're having, but let's focus it on this one thing. Okay? And when we get specific, then we start doing something that I think is very important, and that is listening to hear what the person has to say, not just listening for them to shut up so you can say what you have to say. If you get nothing else that I say to you today, take that from it. Okay, we have to listen to other people to actually hear them, hear what they're saying, not just sit there and go over in our minds what we're going to say when they stop talking. That's number one. If we can't do that, then the rest of this stuff is meaningless. Okay, so that's number one. That's the key. But we get into the discussion, the argument, if you will, and how do we do that? Well, A, we get specific. Okay, I've already said that. B, we have to separate the person from the topic. How many times have you seen, like on Facebook or whatever, or even see people talking, and somebody says something, and the immediate reaction from the other person is wrong, or you're wrong, or you don't know what you're talking about, and then the listening to hear is over at that point. Okay, so you got to separate the person from the topic. There's another thing that you got to do along that same line is not to get personal with the person. It's called an ad hominem attack. They say something you don't like, and so the first thing you do is talk about how they're stupid, or tell them they're stupid. Now, conversation's over. It's done. This is not an argument. Okay, this is just a shouting match, or one side of one at least. So separate the person from the topic. None of that, oh, you're wrong, or anything like that. This is not about the person. We're doing the first part. We're getting specific and talking about the thing, whatever it is. The idea is what we're talking about, not the person who is putting forth the idea, but the idea itself. Okay? So then the next thing we do is we find points of agreement. Usually, people want the same thing. If we're talking about, all kinds of different things, we want the same thing in the end. Our disagreement is how to go about getting that thing. So that's where the real argument comes in. Most of us want what's right for our families, what's right for our kids. We want what's right for our country. We want what we believe is right. And so a lot of times we agree on the end result of what we want. We just don't agree on how to get there. So we have to really listen to the person and try to find points of agreement. Try to find some things that we agree on, okay? Then we can talk about the things we disagree on. So that's the next step. After we find a point of agreement, then we start asking questions. Now, here's where we got to be careful, okay? So many times we get into conversations or we hear other conversations. This may not be about you, it may not be about me, but it probably is a little bit. And we hear them asking these questions, and we can even tell by the way they ask the question that they don't really want your answer. They just want to trap you. They want to turn it into a gotcha. And we have to be very careful ourselves not to turn conversations, not to turn arguments, disagreements into gotchas and traps. Okay? You're not trying to get some kind of viral clip. Okay? A lot of the so-called interviews that we see on TV or on social media or whatever, they're not there to get real answers. They're not there to find points of agreement. They're trying to get somebody to blow their top so they can cut that into a clip and put it out there on the internet and get clips, make it viral. That's their goal. They're not looking for points of agreement, not looking for, things that they can actually fix or ways to fix things. They're just looking to get somebody off their game so that they can, get that viral clip, get the clicks, make the money off the ads. When it comes to you and me, that's not what we're doing. We're not trying to get a viral clip. We're not trying to trap somebody. Hopefully, at this point in our conversation, in our argument, if you will, that we're actually trying to find a solution to a problem. Something's going on that's caused this. We've had a disagreement about an action or about an idea, and we're trying to find a resolution to this. So ask genuine questions. No gotchas, no traps. Okay? When you've done that, then you can get into a conversation where you're really looking for answers. Okay? Not just to prove that you're smarter than the other person, not to prove that your idea is better than the other person's idea, but to really try to find some common ground, find some things that we can agree on. Like I said in the beginning, most people agree on most things most of the time. We do, whether you're right wing, left wing, center, whatever, politically, all of these different things. Most of us have a lot of things that we agree on. But what gets all the press are the things that we don't agree on. The crazies on the left, the crazies on the right, these are the people that we hear and see all the time because they get clicks and they get views, and the people posting that stuff make money from the advertisements. That's why we're fed all this stuff. And I'm not even going to go into the fact that certain leaders like to keep us folks, the real people, the little people, they like to keep us fighting each other. Because as long as we're fighting each other, well, then we're not going to be fighting against them. We're not going to be turning on them. So just keep us fighting each other, and that's the goal. You and I are not arguing to do that. That's not our goal. Okay, our goal is to find a way to come to agreement on something. Find out something new. Find out a way to move forward that's better for both of us and better for the people around us. Now, I told you that at the end I would tell you how to end it, and I think this is very important. Okay, but before I say how to end it, let me say this: acknowledging somebody else's point, which is one of the ways to end it. That's the first thing you do is you find that thing you can agree on. But acknowledging their point does not mean that you are surrendering your position. Okay? It doesn't. Some people look at this and they say, well, if I acknowledge anything you said is right, that means I'm giving up on what I'm saying. No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that at all. So one of the best ways I have found there are a couple of things. One of the best ways I've found to bring an argument to its conclusion is ask a question, okay? Just look at the person and say, can you see something in my position that you think is reasonable? And, almost always they'll say yes. And, just kind of work with that. Just ask them, is there anything that you heard me say? Have you heard or seen anything in my position that seems reasonable and makes sense to you? Almost always they say yes, okay? And hopefully they'll say something back to you. Finally, the way to bring it to an end in a peaceful manner is not, like I said in the beginning, it's not to say, well, I guess we're just going to have to agree to disagree. That's such a load of crap. That just means, neither one of us learned anything. Neither one of us gained anything. All we did was we have the satisfaction of being able to tell our friends, boy, I told him or I told her, what? Okay, fine. If your ego needs that, then fine. We're probably not going to have a decent argument anyway. And quite frankly, people who have those kinds of egos and so on like that, I'm not going to hang out with them much anyway. And if I find myself in a position where, I have to hang out with them or whatever, I'm not going to argue. I'm just going to let it go. If it's not a person, like I said in the beginning, that we can actually talk to and try to find some common ground, there's not really any need in talking to them about that subject, okay? Finally, took me a minute to get here, but finally, the best way to end an argument is to thank them. Thank that person for sharing their ideas with you. Thank that person for giving you something to think about. I can sometimes say something like this. I really appreciate this discussion, and I want to thank you for giving me a different perspective to think about. That's it. That's end of the conversation, okay? Try to take these, think about them, see where they work for you. If you like what I'm saying here, click like or share, something like that. Thank you for listening.